Welcome back everyone. In today's video the main focus will be Discipline Priest. This is a PvP guide for World of Warcraft patch 9.2 in which I will talk about talents, PvP talents, legendaries, covenants and stat priority. I know this priest is not in the best spot right now, but nonetheless it's one of my favorite healers, and as many of you have asked for a guide, I will deliver. Before we go any further, I want to talk about some key features regarding Discipline Priest and why I like it so much. Healing as Disc Priest can be unique in its own way. Atonement can be a blessing and a curse at the same time. In a perfect world, you want as much atonement healing as possible, meaning that you have to dish out consistent damage while keeping the atonement buff on yourself or your teammates. This gives your team pressure and makes you very mana efficient. Obviously, you want to trade defensive cooldowns in a smart way to counter enemy offensive cooldowns, and sometimes if that is not enough, you might be forced into more expensive type of healing like spamming some Shadowlands or even Power Word Radiance. Being forced to constantly use the previous mentioned abilities means you will go out of mana very fast. A few other things to mention: don't refresh Atonement too soon unless you have to. Always use Penance on cooldown as it's very mana efficient, and don't get locked in Shadow if you're about to get CC'd, as you won't be able to use Shadow or Death to get yourself out of a crowd control like Polymorph, Fear, Trap, Hex and so on. It's all fun and games in theory, but in practice we all do a lot of mistakes. I really hope this helps a lot, so let's dive into talents. My standard talent build looks like this. If you've watched some of my previous videos, you know that I am a big fan of masochism, as very often I find myself as a target in arena. There are of course some variations. Twist of Fate can be very good in 3v3 versus heavy CC compositions like Rogue Mage. Body and Soul should always be picked if you are not a kill target, as masochism loses value if you are not being trained. Mindbender should be used when you lack the extra global cooldown to use Power Word Solace. Shining Force is a decent option in Battlegrounds or in some situations on Z-axis maps like Blade's Edge. Sins of the Many, Purge the Wicked and Lenience are mandatory and you should always pick them. Moving on to PvP talents, my standard picks in most situations are Dome of Light and Inner Light and Shadow. Dome of Light reduces Power Word Barrier cooldown and increases its damage reduction. You need this to counter most offensive cooldowns in the game, and you can even pre-barrier incoming crowd control while the enemy team is doing a setup on your teammate. Inner Light and Shadow is very flexible. You can either benefit from the mana cost reduction of your healing spells, or you can choose more spell damage and atonement healing. I pretty much always start with Inner Shadow, and if I see it's going to be a longer in a match, I sometimes switch to Inner Light. As for the third option, in most 2v2 games I pick Blaze of Light for the extra damage, and Penance utility, which either increases or decreases your target's movement speed. More damage with Smite and Penance means more pressure and more atonement healing, and it stacks up really well with Inner Shadow. Another option is Purification, making your Purify have an extra charge. This is very useful in several situations like versus a Destruction Warlock or versus Rogue Mage teams or versus Holy Priest Fire Mage teams. The list goes on. But if you find yourself needing extra friendly dispels, this could help you a lot. Now, I try to stay far away from Ultimate Radiance as much as possible in 2v2 because it's just very mana hungry. This, however, might change in the future when I get the full tier set bonus. For 3v3 it's pretty much mandatory, as you will need that burst AoE healing after crowd control chains or during enemy offensive cooldowns. It's almost impossible to play without it. There are of course other solid PvP talents as well, like Dark Archangel, used in more offensive setups, Improved Mass Dispel, useful versus mages, Thought Steel used mostly versus mages and warlocks, however I like none of them in this patch, just because the other PvP talents mentioned earlier are far more important in my opinion. Next we have legendary powers. First I want to cover the regular legendary powers and then move on to the Covenant legendary powers provided by Unity, as we will transition into Covenant choices. I will start with the stronger legendaries and slowly move towards less stronger ones. This is obviously debatable, but it is my opinion and we'll go along with it. First we have the Penitent one, which will probably be the best legendary throughout the rest of this expansion in 3v3, maybe even in 2v2 as well. The reason for this is it has an insane synergy with the 4-piece tier set bonus. Power of the Dark Side increases the effectiveness of penance by an additional 45% and is triggered when Power Word Radiance is cast. This, combined with the 3 extra bolts provided by the legendary, will turn you into a machine gun. Well, at least sometimes, giving you a burst of either single target damage or healing. Like I said, insane synergy. Next on my list is Measured Contemplation, and on its own this is a solid and very mana efficient legendary for 2v2 bracket, which gets even better with the first set bonus. Right now Sefu's Proclamation is my personal favorite, as recently I've been playing around with the Echoing Resolve trinket and the Kyrian Soulbind trait Soulsteel Clamps. On top of that, my priest is also human, which makes this an overall interesting build. More on that when we get to the Covenant section. The last legendary, which I personally don't recommend but some players like, is Crystalline Reflection. The reason why I don't like this legendary is mostly dampening. In Arena, as dampening scales up, you lose both healing and damage from this legendary. However, I can understand it being strong in other PvP environments like rated battlegrounds. Now, as we move into the Covenant legendary powers, we also start moving into the Covenant section, as the Unity legendary changes its powers according to the Covenant you are currently in. So once you have crafted Unity, feel free to swap around Covenants with no shame. There are currently 3 strong Covenants, and as we go through each one, we need to keep in mind different things, as now Covenant choice is not just about Covenant abilities and Soulbinds anymore. I will start with Night Fae, as this Covenant is mostly strong in 3v3 right now. It's not bad in 2v2, but I think you get more value from it in 3v3, as you will need the extra defensive cooldown and the mana longevity provided by the Fae Guardians. This fits in perfectly for this bracket scenario, where you are more likely to spend a lot more mana. Your best Soulbind for Night Fae is Corraine, mostly because of Wild Hunt tactics and Wild Hunt stratagem. These 2 Soulbind traits are perfect for Disciplined Priests, as it directly buffs your Atonement healing, making you even more mana efficient. For Conduits, your best options are Translucent Image, Move with Grace, Clear Mind, Shining Radiance, Pain Transformation, and Swift Penitence. Next we have Venthyr as the traditional Covenant for all priest specs. Less and less disc priests are Venthyr these days as the meta changes. Some pick Night Fae mostly for 3v3, while others pick Kyrian mostly for 2v2. The Venthyr legendary is also not that strong, with Friendly Dispel having 8 seconds cooldown, the extra Mind Games duration and the increased damage or healing reversed makes this legendary less effective unless you have extended crowd control chains. Nadia is still the best Soulbind, mostly because of Thrill Seeker and Fatal Flaw. However, you might also want to pick Familiar Predicaments and Nimble Steps along the way. Best Conduits for Venthyr are Clear Mind, Translucent Image, Shattered Perceptions, Light's Inspiration, Swift Penitence, and Pain Transformation or Shining Radiance, depending if you are playing Ultimate Radiance or not. Moving on to my favorite Covenant, Kyrian in its current state and in combination with the second legendary makes it a powerhouse. Boon of the Ascended deals a lot of damage and healing, and while it seems it has a long cooldown, Sphere's Harmony together with Effusive Anima Accelerator reduces its cooldown to around 90 seconds. On top of everything, it heals through Atonement. Hands down, the best Soulbind is Mikanikos. Having so many good Soulbind traits, it's really hard not to pick him. Braun, Forge Light Filter, Soul Glow Spectrometer, and Diffusive Anima Accelerator are all incredible traits. As mentioned earlier, right now I am playing a different build. Soul Steel Clamps stacks with Cephus and both stack with Echoing Resolve Trinket. So instead of receiving a 7.2 seconds Hammer of Justice, if you have the buff and Cephus, you will only get stunned for 5.4 seconds. And then of course, next crowd control you are immune and so on. On top of this, like previously mentioned, my priest is also human to get out of stuns in case of emergency. I'm sure it's not the best build, but I am definitely having fun with it at the moment. Best conduits are Translucent Image, Clear Mind, Swift Penitence, Courageous Ascension, Light's Inspiration, and Pain Transformation or Shining Radiance, again depending if you're playing Ultimate Radiance or not. Changing Covenants is free and you can swap as many times as you want. In my opinion, you should experiment with all of them and see what fits your playstyle more. That's everything I had to say about legendary powers and covenants. I am not sure if it's needed, but we should cover stat priority as well. Versatility comes first, then haste while trying to get the haste breakpoints, then mastery, and lastly critical strike. Haste will reduce your global cooldown and the cooldown of some abilities only when it reaches certain breakpoints. I'll give you a few examples. Having 11% haste will get you 1.3 seconds global cooldown. Your Mind Blast and Power Word Solace will have 13 seconds cooldown. Having 21% haste will get you 1.2 seconds global cooldown. Your Mind Blast and Power Word Solace will have 12 seconds cooldown. Having 31% haste will get you 1.1 seconds global cooldown. Your Mind Blast and Power Word Solace will have 11 seconds cooldown. This means that having, for example, 13% haste or 24% haste will not give you any added benefit outside of the breakpoints mentioned earlier. I really hope this guide is not very long. I did my best to keep it as short as possible while providing a lot of useful information. Thank you so much for watching this far. If you have other questions or suggestions, please use the commentary section below. I do my best to answer all comments as soon as I am able to. Hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already, as it helps the channel a lot. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.